Well, of course.
Tablets.
No idea. The only thing that we knew was tabula rasa.
Oh, I'm gonna have to read it to see.
Yeah.
It's red. Is it red? Is it on? It's on. All right.
I would like to call to order the meeting of the Long Range Planning and Policy Subcommittee meeting of the Airport Commission in advance of the Airport Commission meeting. The meeting is being audio and video recorded. The members of the subcommittee are Mr. Gasparo, who is not here, Ms. Planzer, and myself. There being two of us, I declare that a quorum is present for the purpose of this meeting. And the agenda, is there any comment on the agenda? Just the minutes are the only thing on the agenda, right?
Right.
So we have a set of minutes, and do you have any comments on them?
No.
I propose that we adopt them by unanimous consent because of the two of us. It's sort of silly to have a vote if you're agreeable.
I'm agreeable.
Thank you. Are there any commissioners' comments?
Do you want me to
Sure.
tell you what I found out about the
Yeah,
concrete?
Mrs. Topham was at the meeting, and she volunteered to inquire of a relative of hers who's in the airport design business, I guess, about the wisdom of using concrete versus asphalt.
She was saying it would be great to have concrete, but it's going to be a hard sell with the FAA, because it is much more expensive. And I think possibly we could sell it because the asphalt has not been lasting in Nantucket. But she said the moisture gets in the asphalt and then it breaks up and cracks, like that, where in concrete it doesn't. So that was her comment, so.
All right, thank you. Are there any other commissioners' comments? Is there any public comment at this time? Hearing none, I declare us adjourned. I will now open the meeting of. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the March 10th, 2020 meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. This meeting is both being audio and video recorded. Mr. Rafter, the airport manager, is not here. He's away at a airport executives conference, and I'd like to welcome Noah Carberg, the assistant manager, in his place. And finally, Mr. Gasparo told us he would be a little late. I expect him shortly, but we're going to go ahead without him. Are there any comments on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, it's adopted. Are any changes to the minutes of February 11th,
No.
2020? May I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. And may I have a motion, please, to ratify the warrants of February 19th and March 4th, 2020?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there public comment at this time? Pending leases and contracts, would you run through those quickly, please, Mr. Carberg?
Yes, before you have a license agreement with Gamma Aviation. This is a maintenance firm who will base a van on premises. We would receive a $1,500 business fee plus additional parking revenue. We have a contract amendment for $35,000 for McFarland Johnson. This is an increase from $10,000 to $45,000 and an additional 2 years in scope. It's commensurate with the duration of the projects it's meant to provide guidance on. We have another contract with McFarland Johnson for hangar development and review for $14,700. This is to review code, site, and environmental conditions associated with a potential new hangar development. We have a contract with Weston Solutions for a to-be-determined amount. It's shown on your handout as pending. What we are asking for the commission to do is to authorize the chair to sign this agreement at a later time due to its critical regulatory nature. It's to install what's referred to as a POET system, a point of entry treatment system for the Thompson House, which is the airport-owned seasonal employee housing.
Could you say that again, please, Mr. Carberg? What that is doing, what they're going to be doing? I didn't hear it come
It's called a POET system. POET is the acronym for a point of entry treatment system. It's a inline water filtration device, and I'll cover more details on that in my manager's report.
Okay, thank you.
And the final item is a contract again for McFarland Johnson for $22,200. It's to provide what's known as AB operator services for the underground storage tanks in the fuel farm. And in the fuel farm, these operator services are to provide monthly inspections for the tanks. It's a Mass DEP requirement. The contract is written so as if and when we elect to have a staff member certified to perform these inspections, we can end the contract at that date and only accrue the 2-day charges.
Any questions? All right, excluding the contract with Weston Solutions, is there a motion to approve the license agreement with Gamma Aviation and the contract amendment and 2 new contracts with McFarland Johnson?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
For the contract with Weston Solutions, I will entertain a motion to approve the contract not to exceed $15,000 and to authorize the chair or the vice chair to sign the contract on behalf of the airport when it's ready and approved by administration.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Crew quarters development.
Thank you. There were 2 follow-up items from the long-range planning meeting. The first was to designate a $300,000 transfer from retained earnings to a capital item, which will come up later in this agenda. The second is to review the previous housing article at ATM and see if a placeholder article is necessary for future site work and construction. The answer to this is yes, a new article would be required for construction and bonding.
And then the Long Range Planning Committee is still dealing with the issue of whether we should go ahead with that, given all the other priorities, financial priorities in the airport.
For the Town Government Study Committee, the article is Article 94 as is printed in the warrant that has been distributed. It is indeed the same article as drafted by Airport and Town Council. The Government Study Committee did reach out to Town Administration and subsequently to Mr. Rafter for some language process clarification, which was provided to everyone's satisfaction.
Any questions? The next item is a Mass DOT grant award, acceptance of a grant award and associated grant assurances for a purchase loader with forestry mulcher or other, however you want to describe it. Is there a motion to approve the acceptance of that grant?
I'll move acceptance of the grant for the loader with the forestry mulcher.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. The north ramp, which is really should say space allocation policy or slot allocation policy. Would you like to address that?
This item, which was provided last month, is pending for review. It is finalized and it will be in the packet and on the agenda in April for your review and potential approval.
All right, thank you. Budget transfers.
We have 6 or 7 budget transfer items. All of these are from retained earnings.
These are for action at town meeting.
For action at town meeting. And I believe it does also require your approval by vote today. For the purpose of minimizing long-term debt, the first item is $400,000 from retained earning to our operating budget. The second is $119,200 to capital for funding of the skid steer loader. $62,000 and change.
Excuse me, you skipped over the wages, salaries and wages budget, 50,000.
I did. That is not in my notes. I believe this is for an increase in seasonal help for the upcoming season. Increase in seasonal wages to attract and maintain qualified help.
All right, thank you.
62,000 and change to capital for replacement of Airport 4, which is a 20-plus year old utility body truck. The old one will go to DPW. $4,178 to capital for the sponsor share of the Apron Area 3 resurfacing project. This would be the area of hard stands 3 and 4. $178,000 to capital for an airport maintenance project that was designated for markings removal and the associated paint and beads. $300,000 previously mentioned to discuss items associated with employee housing review. And $300,000 for the sponsor share of the security system project upgrades.
Are there any questions on those transfers? Is there a motion to approve the transfers prior to their submission to town meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfers printed in Article
17, as excerpted, right?
As listed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any additional comment? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. Fee waiver.
So we're bringing an item to your attention on the impact of our rates and charges, the fee associated with the seasonal hold room. This is our 3-season boarding tent. Specifically, flat fees do have an impact on 9-seat carriers in a proportionally higher way than they do on 76 100-seat carriers. This was an issue that was originally raised by Southern Airlines, who is returning this season, and they will have a sterile route to Providence. I asked that I bring it forward. I felt comfortable. I wanted to make sure that I did give you a rates and charges package that matched your sponsor's philosophy. And I wanted to make sure that this was consistent with the philosophy, and I would ask the commission to consider at their discretion if they would entertain a fee waiver related to this charge at a future commission meeting. And I can propose 2 options that I'd recommend for your potential consideration. The commission could entertain to reopen the public hearing on rates and charges for consideration of this specific item, or the commission could entertain giving staff direction to propose modifications to the air service incentive program. They both come with a different set of pluses and minuses. You're not necessarily obligated to choose to hear this fee waiver, but those are the 2 options that staff would
Well, the
propose.
third option is not to hear it.
The third is to not hear.
Right. We discussed this, maybe a little more background. The vice chair and Mr. Carberg and I discussed this morning at our pre-meeting meeting. And the intent is it would only apply, if there were to be any kind of waiver or adjustment under the rates and charges, it would only apply to year-round, provider of year-round service. And we discussed whether there is some way to guarantee that
we got that year-round service if we gave the waiver. And it's a little difficult to fit it into the incentives because this is not new service. There will be additional service. Mr. Carberg assures me it can be done if that's what the commission wishes. We got to be careful we don't offend other people as well. And so we've got to have something specific to tie it to. So anyway, that's basically what it's all about. And if anybody has any questions or comments, I think it'd be appropriate to raise them, because this is a bit of a deviation from what our standard practice has been.
I had a thought, which was that my concern being that someone says they're gonna, coming into the summer season, they intend to be year-round, you give them the discount, they make all the money in the summer, come, October, say, I'm sorry, it's just not working, and they got the waiver. And I would like to consider a way that perhaps the waiver is a year 2 waiver, and you pay your fee if you operate as everybody else does, and then if you did 1 year, you're waived for the second year. So in other words, it incentivizes an operator to maintain a year-round service, doesn't leave us hanging, if you will, and then for year 2, that fee would be waived.
That's fine, I think, until they decide some November to get out. And you've sort of got a rolling thing there.
Well, I think after year 2, then you're paying.
Well, that's right, under the incentive program.
Under the incentive program, it's
incentive
only
program, you'd
because
have to pay,
you've
that's
got to
right.
get to a point where we're also recouping,
Right,
the charges and the costs,
right, and everybody's on the same
but to try to sort of
field.
right, because we don't really have any protection against sort of, I think what we've seen, people say that they're gonna operate, and then we give the waiver, and then they don't.
How much is the waiver worth?
This one was
$6,200.
Correct.
So it's somewhat meaningful to somebody who's going to be there all winter long.
But it also has to be the secure service. It can't be one of the other non-secure services that they're offering. I believe.
Is there any airline
That would
that we
certainly be
think
my
is
information.
likely to?
There's one that's asked.
Okay. Okay.
But it might open others seeing that they got it, and then asking too.
And do you think the one that's asked will continue, or are you?
They haven't
Oh, do
started.
you have
I don't
any
know.
They haven't started.
That's why we're having this discussion.
Fingers
Well,
crossed.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking. If they've talked to the people, they might know. Let's get a general feel.
Well, they're saying they're going to.
And just for clarity, we waived the fee for them for this same service last year.
There wasn't a need to, because the previous Southern Airlines was not providing a sterile service last year, so the fee for the outdoor boarding area didn't apply.
I thought they were doing
Yeah.
Providence.
They did Providence, but they did it non-securely. They went from Nantucket to a non-secure FBO at TF Green. This next year, they're lining their service to go right into the terminal. So it is it's a wrinkle we hadn't yet seen in that order.
Well, I suppose, could that then be used as justification that it is new service because it's new secure service, and last year, just to differentiate?
Yeah, well, I hope there's something more than that. I think it's a fine line. I would rather see that plus something like additional service. But let's wait and see what you all come up with. Does anybody have a preference? I think if you put it in the rates and charges, it's like waving a flag in front of people saying this is available.
I think that's right.
I think we want it as part of the incentive.
And I think that is probably appropriate, because it is traditional in these incentive programs to identify and define new market service, additional service from an existing or an incumbent. And I think there's an avenue to make sure that it's applied in a fair treatment commensurate with our grant assurances.
So one other question on the proposed service and from the press release. did they not have interline agreements last year because they went non-secure, and then this year they will?
That's correct.
So that's a
That's new
fair.
service. That's new
That's
service.
a fair point.
That's a
you
new
know
service.
that you can.
Significant difference.
Yeah. Thanks.
So we'll hear more on that subject from you. Correct?
Correct. We'll have items ready for your review next month.
Okay. The manager's report.
For project updates, the security project phase 1 work is underway. This consists largely of installing conduit and the data and wire runs occurring this week. The critical work in the next 2 to 3 weeks is to bring the new access control system online sequentially in a manner so the new card readers and the new badges will all work with the new equipment and the old equipment as it's transferred over. For phase 2 of the security project, the bids are in. The low bidder was Levangia Electric for just under $3.2 million and under estimate of $3.25 million. The award letter has gone out notifying the award pending appropriation at annual town meeting. And for the commissioner's information, just to review, the total project cost of phases 1 and 2 is $5.8 million. We had originally appropriated $2.1 million total at 2019 annual town meeting, but due to cost increases being greater than estimate, we broke the project into 2 phases, and we have a subsequent borrowing at this annual town meeting for $4 million, and that will complete the funding. For the environmental assessment, environmental impact statement, we had a positive phone call with the Massachusetts environmental folks at MEPA. The requirements they do require that the project include a level of greenhouse gas and energy analysis and some additional public archaeology lab survey work. We also had an initial requirement to address some grading work that ended up not being required by the FAA. All of these items will be wrapped up in what we're calling a Scope C. For the EIR will have a task order for you. We're anticipating a small fiscal year 21 AIP grant to fund that work. PFC application, we've scheduled the airline consultation meeting for April 14th, which is our next major milestone, and we've supplied the FAA with some requested information on our de-icing truck. For our fuel farm rehabilitation, we're taking a short break on that project to reconcile some stakeholder disagreements on the best path for bidding that project under mass procurement law. There are 2 paths. I don't necessarily remember the title names, but one requires items A, B, and C. One requires items X, Y, and Z. So we're reaching out to the Attorney General's office just for clarification. Obviously, we want to proceed in the best way possible. For Taxiway Echo, we held a 100% design review meeting last Tuesday. Between the 90% and 100% review stage, the FAA raised some concern with our existing modification to standard, our airport certification manual, and the 5010 master record. Briefly, the concern is how all 3 of these different documents reconcile language with regards to the separation distance between Taxiway Echo, Taxiway Fox, and Taxiway Golf. The FAA's concern is that any perceived mismatch by the Washington office could delay our Taxiway Echo funding, so they're looking out for us to make sure that all of these items do align. While their intent was positive with the directives that they gave us, we did find out that their instructed solution is not necessarily workable from an air traffic control standpoint and from having the ability to taxi our day-to-day fleet mix past each other on these taxiways. We've advised the FAA of these shortcomings, and we're waiting to hear how they address it. The most likely option is a letter of agreement to go along with our modification to standard. There are several examples in the region of how this works at Boston. We're waiting to hear more information back from the FAA. The other item is there's a stub on taxiway Fox that is likely going to be deemed ineligible. It's not material for purposes of the bid. We can address it as an addendum to the contract. It's, for those intimately familiar with the airfield, it's the stub of taxiway Foxtrot that comes up off of Echo. And we'll advise more on that for the next meeting. For the RFP bid update, we have a number of procurement documents in process. The request for expression of interest for hangar development. We earlier had a task order that you approved, which we appreciate, and we'll continue to meet with the interested builder and evolve that project. The request for expression of interest for the freight hangar has been revised based on input from the Long Range Planning Subcommittee. We're working on scheduling dates for that release and response. The post-screening concession opportunity is at the town for review. This is for the service that was provided by the Flying Minnow last season. We're anticipating releasing this RFP on the 18th for responses due back on April 15th for approval at the May Commission meeting. We'd also like to hold out if there's interest on the commission for for a commission member to be a representative on the RFP review committee. Please contact Airport Staff. We don't need to do a formal item at the commission meeting for here. RFQs for engineering and planning services were issued on the 19th. The pre-bid meeting was held on the 5th. Responses are due on the 20th, so that item is moving. For the fuel farm inspections, bids were received on the 25th of February. We had 2 bidders. We're researching those bids now. No award has been made. For an operations update, we mentioned that Southern Airways is returning. They announced Hyannis as a new route, Providence as a secure route, and Norwood service that starts April 17th at a less than weekly rate and then daily on May 22nd.
Less than weekly?
Less than daily. JetBlue has notified us that they're reviewing their schedule that we had previously published. They pulled a late afternoon daily Boston turn. They indicated that this is a system and scheduling issue. They do anticipate coming back with flights. It's not a route performance issue. System-wide coronavirus concerns are present in the air travel system. There are some indications of softening immediate demand. This hasn't been seen at ACK yet. For example, United is reducing the route by 10%, domestically, JetBlue by 5%. These tend to be immediate April and May reductions. March and April reductions. We haven't had any indication on if this will affect the Nantucket summer schedule, but we'll keep the commission apprised. The transition of our FBO point of sale system is occurring with cutover in a week. Staff is preparing for our annual certification inspection, which will take place on May 27th to 29th. Representative Fernandez has advanced an amendment in the House Transportation Bill, which would allow the airport to assess fees similar to what is in place at Massport. We hope to see this through to Baker's desk. There's an article in your packet to that effect. It was also picked up by the Globe.
And for the public, I think you need to be a little more specific of what this is about.
So currently, only Massport airports are allowed to assess the rideshare companies, Uber, Lyft, sidecar, and smaller ones fees for operating at the airport. What we believe was a legislative oversight precluded non-Massport airports, predominantly in the Cape and Islands, from assessing a similar fee. Representative Fernandez has proposed a very minor language amendment that inserts the appropriate term airport commission in place of Massport. And that was well received in the House. I believe it's looking positive in the Senate. Of course, I believe Governor Baker has a line item veto, so we would have to see how that resolves. But then hopefully within a short period of time, we could begin collections here at Nantucket. Mass DOT has notified us that they are bidding out a multi-airport crack sealing effort. It has a value of about $500,000 potentially to Nantucket. So we wanted to express our thanks. We'll follow up with the appropriate letter. They're working on that scope and effort right now with airport staff. But that would be a huge help and a huge effort to prolong the life of our pavement. TSA bag belt reimbursement continues. We had a conference call to discuss legislative strategy. This conference call is a group of airports who are owed money from the TSA from installing baggage handling systems. We sent letters to our delegation urging funding. The ask nationally is $50 million in appropriation, which could potentially mean around $200,000 to Nantucket if it's appropriated, and if it's appropriated at the same cost share basis among the affected airports. Internally, what we call Statue Park, you might have noticed there's a line of vegetation that's been removed. It was for maintenance on the irrigation system and removal of some problem vegetation. We think it looks great. If not, take a look out at it next time you drive by. Let us know your opinion. Airfield mowing in compliance.
Is that going to be impacted by infiltrator work for the gas station? Is that an issue?
That area should not be impacted by any gas station work, at least that I know that has been proposed or recently done. Airfield mowing in support of our natural heritage and endangered species conservation management permit has occurred utilizing our new machine. It works great. Staff love it. It's increased our own efficiency, which again reduces our management costs. So we're doing the best thing for these rare species at a low cost to the airport and at a benefit to our hazardous wildlife program too. So it's a win-win-win. Related to that, the meeting of our technical advisory committee meeting has been scheduled. I believe Commissioner Gasparo has just confirmed attendance this afternoon, which is always welcome. That will take place on the 27th of March. Our consultant on behalf of the airport has put forth a notice of intent, an NOI for short, to the local Concom as part of our security project. We're including replacement of, it's either 1,400 or 1,700 feet of fencing fabric around the south end of the airport and on Nobadir Beach. We have a March 16th site walk scheduled with Concom staff and a March 18th hearing that will likely be extended to April 1st to accommodate the natural heritage response on that program. Our fair market value policy, the Martha's Vineyard Airport has reached out. They're dealing with the same issue with rapid escalation in lease rates. And they've reached out for our policy, and we're providing that and our reasoning to the Vineyard, as well as reviewing the status of that document with FAA compliance. If you remember, it started for us in the bunker area. We had some legacy leases at a low rate, and then we had a new appraisal that was 2 to 3 times that rate, and the commission was tasked with reconciling our fair market value requirements without driving tenants off the airport. So your work is moving through the region. Should be proud of yourselves. I'd like to discuss an item that's generally been known by its acronym as PFAS. It's an acronym that encompasses a group of chemical compounds that are known as forever compounds or man-made compounds. It stands for polyfluorinated alkyl substances, but we go by the acronym PFAS. Recently, our licensed site professional tested 5 well locations on the airport. 3 of these locations tested above the Mass DEP exceedance of 20 parts per trillion for the regulated PFAS compounds. 2 of these are monitoring wells on the airport. They don't feed groundwater to any location. They're strictly a monitoring well that we had installed as part of an EPA monitoring program. And one of the locations was at the Thompson House. I wanted to relay information that this is still very early in the testing and analysis process. We have identified DEP exceedances, but this is just the first step. Our key focus right now is really scheduling further testing for off-airport sites so our consultant and the DEP can better understand the distribution and nature of any contamination. And of course, to address the Thompson House right away. Earlier, I mentioned the POET system at the Thompson House, and Commissioner Topham had a further question about this. Because there was an exceedance of total PFAS in the drinking water well for the Thompson House, we feel the best step is to skip over providing bottled water and instead provide a treatment system in line that can guarantee that all water in the Thompson House can meet the DEP criteria. It's an airport-owned residence, and we have responsibility for the employees who will be in there. So moving forward, any strategy that the airport undertakes will be informed by further testing, focused on dispersion and how this compound moves through the groundwater, and what we call the forensic work, or the fingerprinting, the actual type of the different PFAS compounds that are found in each well. This is important because different classes of these compounds are associated with different products or different treatments, whether it's from wastewater, whether it's from legacy AFFF foam, or if it's from different sites. Once that's known, we may be able to determine more about the origin and source contribution. All of this is very early now, but it is possible that not all PFAS on the airport originated from our own use. That's something we'll keep track of. And we will continue to reach out through our licensed site professional to the DEP and to the homeowners in potentially affected areas as we coordinate testing. We're anticipating that to take place as these homes are opened up for the season in the May to June timeframe.
I think it's important to understand here that we're really, I won't say at the mercy of, but we're subject strongly to the direction of the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, and the advice of our licensed site professional and how we proceed, and nothing will be done without their direction and blessing, both. So should the question arise as what is the airport doing, is we're doing what we're told, is the answer.
Better than that, who sets the standard for how much PFAS is too much, or what kind of PFAS is too much? Is that a national standard, a state standard?
Currently, it's a state standard. Mass DEP has regulatory authority on the issue. The EPA has been working at a slower pace. A lot of the states and even local municipalities are ahead of the curve. But the DEP sets the standard at 20 parts per trillion.
Do we know whether that limit is exceeded all over the island or just at the house that was being tested? I mean, it seems to me that this could persist over the entire island, and we would have no ability to ever ameliorate it.
That's correct, and it could be a problem that goes far beyond the airport's
So I think we
responsibility.
should start asking some questions along that line.
This is where we have to look to the DEP for guidance.
Right. Well, it seems like the DEP makes up a standard which we could not possibly make or comply with. We ought to find out whether that standard's met anywhere on the island. Maybe the whole island has that level of PFAS for all we know.
That is beyond the scope of our authority. There is another body charged with dealing with that, and so far they haven't. And I think that's the way I'd like to leave the discussion.
Like we're operating in the darkness here, which I don't like much.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be flip about it or to be hiding anything. But as you can understand, it's a very sensitive subject. And we have been advised by our council to basically march in lockstep with the DEP and LPS.
I think further inquiry is required here, but nevertheless, that's what our council advises. Maybe they have more experience with it.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people, who, I think, who are raising this issue. And
Right.
whether that other body will get the message remains to be seen. If they will get it eventually, but
Right.
how soon, I don't know.
Is that a fair statement, Mr. Carberg?
I believe so.
Well, could they prevent us from using our facilities this summer for our extra staff living out on the beach there or not?
The DEP, could they?
If we were not to take steps to address the hazard, yes, I believe they could preclude us from allowing that house to be occupied.
Other than just measuring what this what it is, which I guess has been done, how do you get rid of this? I mean,
You probably don't.
you dig up the entire beach. Sounds like you don't get rid of it.
That's right.
That's where I'm headed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Because we don't know where it comes from.
right. And we don't know how widespread this is.
That's correct.
If I may, to Mr. Viscarin's point, I have the same feeling that I would like to see some exploration with our licensed site professional. I'd like to know at least one or two wells that would be considered up gradient from the airport. You know, what can they do, you know, without us getting involved? What are our options through the staff to know before the water gets to us, sort of a curtain? Is it already coming to us with some higher level? I had the same question. And, so I hope that,
But you also said this morning that the mapping of the groundwater flows isn't perfect.
right. So all the more reason that, you know, certainly, you know, it's moving north to south, but at exactly what angle? So, you know, I think we need more study and information. And I also, you know, think I want to know more about this.
Thank you.
Should I move on to statistics?
Yes, please, if you're finished. Did you say you had a personnel matter? No?
After
You wanted to,
I have,
you wanted to
I can do the
recognize
personnel
someone.
report now.
It's after statistics.
Oh, sorry. All right, okay. Go ahead, now that I've spilled the beans, go ahead.
Okay, for January, I'm sorry. Operations were up 14.59% over last January and up 19.14% year to date. GA ramp operations were down 30%. Emplanements were down 23.5% over last January and up 5.95% year to date.
Do we have any idea about why employments were down? I mean, it's a small number to start with, so any change is a big change. But does it have to do with construction projects? Does it have to do with?
Not all of the Rectrix capacity was picked up by Cape Air, is my interpretation.
Okay.
Cape Air saw a 12% decrease in emplanements, while Nantucket Air was up 65%, or 305 passengers. Tradewind was up 56%, from 9 to 14 passengers. In the Boston market, Cape Air had a 3% increase of 22 passengers. New Bedford traffic was down 54%, or 125 passengers, which is a continuation of that trend. In the Hyannis market for January, Cape Air was down 95%, or 36 passengers, while Nantucket Airlines was up 65%, or 305 passengers. But overall, the Hyannis market was down 38%, or 471 passengers. In the
Do we know how Cape Air distinguishes between Nantucket Air and Cape Air for this purpose of reporting on the Hyannis route? Because again, the Cape Air numbers are so small that it's almost statistically insignificant.
Not offhand. I don't know. In the JFK market, Cape
I mean,
Air,
is it a valid distinction for us to make in our reporting?
between Cape Air and Nantucket Airlines, no, only that Nantucket Airlines tends to be their primary
Right.
Hyannis.
Yeah, exactly. But still basically the same company. I'm wondering if we should consider just simplifying it and putting one. Yeah. I mean, does it matter to them? I wouldn't think so, but maybe we should check.
I think it's more deadhead flights,
Yeah,
you know, and then they pick up somebody.
right. Okay, fair point.
In the JFK market, Cape Air decreased by 80% or 74 passengers.
But I do think it's interesting that in the Hyannis market, basically the traffic was down by what, 60%? My math on the fly math isn't so. That's a big number. And was it because Cape Air didn't have the capacity, or be interesting? I will never know, but that's an interesting statistic. It's just another sign that route has lost its glamour from a traveler's standpoint.
Vineyard traffic continued to decline and was up 264%. That's my mistake. Vineyard traffic increased and was up 264% or 74 passengers. Jet A gallons sold for January were up 13.18% and year-to-date up 2.49%. For February, they were down 43.74%. Just a reminder, overall, these are smaller volumes, even though there is some volatility in the year-to-year swing. Avgas was down 5.69% for January and down 1.87% year-to-date. For February, sales were up 45.21%. Freight for January was down 4.37% and is down 0.65% year-to-date. For noise, we received 1 complaint in January and no complaints in February. So,
Freight?
Assuming there are no statistics questions, we wanted to congratulate...
Freight? You didn't mention freight.
Freight for January was down 4.37% over last January, and year-to-date down 0.65%. Lily Pastor procurement class. The Massachusetts Certified Public Purchasing Official Supplies and Services contracting class, and she has 1 more to go. So we're proud of Lily.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
As you know, Mike O'Neill had retired, and we are backfilling the maintenance supervisor position via an internal posting with interviews to follow. So we will keep you apprised of that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Carberg?
No, thank you.
Good report. Thank you. Commissioners' comments. Anybody have any? If not, I will run quickly through the agenda from the long-range planning meeting and mention a couple of things that didn't already come up.
I had a couple comments.
Go ahead,
And I do too.
please.
So one is Mr. Carberg mentioned the notice of intent for the fence that's being replaced, and I think you all know I've been bringing up the fence for years, and I'm somewhat disappointed to find that we're essentially being told now that we have to put it back where it is, where it's about to fall in because of erosion, and I really want to see that be revisited. And I don't like being, the reason being that all of a sudden it just has to be done in this position. And there's a significant cost for 1,700 feet of fence, and to put it right back on top of the eroding dune just makes no sense to me. And I've asked for planning for some time, for looking at options for relocating that perimeter road a bit, and it's just I hope we can revisit this.
I believe we had some new information tonight from Mr. Carberg that the Conservation Commission and MIPA,
Natural
Heritage will be here to look at the site.
Well, so
Can we use this as a leverage to accelerate what Mr. Gasparo was talking about?
So I may have, there's Heritage consultation. They will not be on site for the site walk on Monday. It will just be Concom staff.
Okay.
We have reached out previously to the administrator to discuss not only the immediate need for wrapping the fence, but also the long-term plan for scaling it back. Just only to paraphrase Mr. Carlson's comments, he believes that this, for the Concom's purposes, might be a one-time permitting effort. They can permit at this, they may be able to permit at this time through the NOI, a relocation under certain conditions that wouldn't require coming back to the commission.
What about natural heritage? What would,
There's a more complicated matter for natural heritage. Replacing the road is an impervious surface, and because of segmentation clauses, the best practice really was to identify it through the EA/EIR process. With the other ongoing projects, there is also a patch of blazing star, roughly 30 to 40 plants, I would estimate, that is in the proposed layout of the road. So we would have to work with natural heritage in conjunction with all of our other capital projects on how that would be addressed. A third potential issue, I don't know if it's an issue, but I believe it would be best practice is to give through this process the different FAA lines of business. If we are moving a fence, the fence does have a reflectivity impact on the ILS system that is adjacent. There are standards. That would be the most important issue I'd just be going on.
okay. All right, well, you're aware of a couple of our concerns. A couple of us have concerns about getting this done and trying not to spend any money we don't have to. So-
There's no reason why staff can't go back to our consultants and see if we can take another crack at this and if it can be accomplished.
Thank you.
You have something else, Mr. Gaspar?
I was going to say, with respect to the the work that was done on the what you call Statue Park area, removal of the vegetation. My concern is I've also raised the issue concerning stormwater and that outfall. There's a direct outfall pipe there from the gas station, and I thought that you guys were going to work on sort of addressing that, and instead I find that a spillway was put in to sort of allow that to continue. If I'm observing what was done there correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that, and I thought we were going to check onto the special permits that had to do with the gas station, and I'm wondering if that's been done, because a direct discharge from the gas station that's flooding, and I've sent pictures in the past of the amount of flooding that happens of the park, and you just went and did all this nice work, and all that seed's going to get blown out. And why are we having an outfall pipe from a gas station, first flush, all going untreated into Statue Park? And so I guess I was sort of, it didn't take the direction I thought that maybe it was going to. In other words, we've accommodated try to accommodate the flow with a spillway instead of just plugging a pipe.
Yeah, I think this is a question that Mr. Rafter should address.
Fair enough. I just wanted to bring it
Yeah,
up
no, that's
because,
fine.
I don't expect it to be resolved tonight,
Right.
but, with all the concerns that we have there for potential pollution and that. So anyway, thank you. One other thing was town meeting. And maybe you had that on your, comments, but we don't have another meeting before town meeting. And hopefully we have two articles, 17 and 94. Somebody could call 17 just because they see the numbers. Wouldn't be surprising of any one of the items, and so I just want to be sure that we have coverage. Whether Mr. Rafter is going to be there, or
As far as I know, he's going to be there.
Yeah.
I will be there, and
I plan to attend too, but I just
Article 93 is another
94.
94. There's another problem from my perspective, because I'm not going to, if it carries over to Monday, which seems likely, I'm not going to be there.
I plan to attend, but I think we'll know if it doesn't get called.
Right.
We'll know Saturday, and we have the finance committee recommendation
Right.
that mirrors the article. So hopefully, but we wouldn't really have another chance to talk about it. So I just wanted to kind of put it on the table that everyone's aware that we do have these two, that something could happen and we should be prepared.
Right. Yeah, I'm not, you're right on the projects one. I doubt very much that it will be singled out, but you never know.
No.
The other one is more of a concern, and we'll need to work on that and talk about it.
Which one is that, sir?
The town government study committee.
Oh, right.
the bypassing the town meeting.
That was all I had.
Thank you.
Mr. Topham?
I wanted to let you know on the same thing that on March 12th, yes, March 12th, Finance Committee is going to have their recommendations or a meeting here, I believe, to just discuss the articles and all. The other thing I saw is that we're now a green community with Lawrence Sinatra. And I wonder if we're gonna think again about the solar panels that we have talked about, and the town was supposed to join us together to see about that, if that's anything feasible.
Well, I think there are two issues there. One is, the reason it was not feasible was primarily for two reasons. And we went through the exercise. I mean, it wasn't just talking about it. We went through the exercise twice. And it was not feasible because of the mitigation required by natural heritage, which was a substantial cash payment, and the unavailability of tax credits to the airport as a non-profit organization.
But you drive into, you fly into
No,
Hyannis
that's,
and.
there's a difference. The Hyannis solar field is built on what's called a brownfield.
Okay,
So there's no mitigation.
all right.
And there were some other issues too, but that's the principal one with the Hyannis one.
I could add a little something to that, which I was going to say anyway. I was contacted today by somebody who has an interest in solar, and I provided them both Tom and Noah's contact information and a copy of the airport layout plan. So you may be hearing from his client, and I didn't really have too much more to say other than there was some past interest, and there was some significant hurdles, and I don't really know.
Right.
Where with changes of administration or how it's over my head.
Well, there's another
on the
issue too,
financing.
which I think we need to put out there, which is that there is a tremendous amount going on with projects.
Oh, that I know.
And the amount of time that Mr. Rafter and Mr. Carberg and the rest of the staff have to spend on new things or revisited things is pretty limited at this point.
I know many people have got it in their homes and they're talking about what they're saving, how much they're saving. So that's why I thought if there was any way we could do that.
Well, I think we should look at it again, but this isn't the time, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
All right, just quickly on the long-range planning and policy committee meeting. We talked I'll go through the agenda and just mention a couple of things. One is the fact that the freight facility, freight hangar number 8 lease over on Old South Road, which had been under a 20-year, or at least a 20-year lease to the McGrath Family Trust and to subleased recently to Allies Air, expires on March 30th. And we've discussed with Allies Air renewing it on a month-to-month basis. The issue is, what is the highest and best use of that building? As we obviously want to promote freight service and get it back, which it isn't really being done in an ideal fashion now. And the High Line has stepped in and is doing a pretty good job of carrying freight for a lot of people. And so what we're trying to do is see whether people have some ideas about how to use that facility. And that's why this request for expressions of interest is going out. And it's one of the things we've talked about is, the issue was in the summertime, running the freight service out of the terminal was bad because of congestion. Is it possible to do it through the freight building in the summer, however defined, and the rest of the year do it through the terminal, which would not require additional staffing for the freight service, which is an issue now for potential operators, and which would enable the freight hangar to be used for what it's frankly being used for this winter, which is storage of JetBlue's ground equipment. And why shouldn't we get the revenue from that rather than rather than somebody else who's paying a very low rent? And this is again the issue that was mentioned a few minutes ago. The rent is about 90 cents a square foot, and the appraisal is in excess of $20 a foot. You know, so we've got to find something that makes sense, that gives us and the public what they want and need, but which is also both financially attractive and financially viable from the operator's perspective and ours. So we'll see what comes up, what happens. And that's what's going on in the freight service. The employee housing we've talked about. I mean, again, it's a question of ultimately having to decide where it's going to fit in the priorities. Mr. Gasparo at the subcommittee meeting made the strong point that we need to sort of get it out there and make a statement. As plans are made, the comment, I think that, you know, if we don't do it before too long, the FAA may change their minds, which wouldn't be a good idea. So we've got to come to grips with it, but it's
What is this $300,000 that's been taken out of our budget going to do with regard to that?
I think ultimately, if we go forward with it, it will be used to pay for site work, primarily.
Okay.
The construction has to be covered under another appropriation authorization.
But we just took $300,000, and why that number?
I can't answer that specifically. I don't know if you can, Mr. Carberg, or not. But we'll get you an answer.
Yeah. It just seemed to be arbitrary, and there was no purpose stated, there's no plan.
I don't think it was arbitrary, but it was.
It sounded like it, to me. Pulled it right out of the air. Well, there's no plan for that. I'm just wondering, what's the plan? If I had
I think
$300,000
it was discussed. I don't remember specifically what the reason was, but.
If I had $300,000 was
All right,
amount of
okay,
money,
all right.
I would
You
like
made
to
your-
know A, B, C, D, and E.
You've
What are
made
we
your
doing with
you
it?
made your point.
Yeah.
We then talked about a little bit more on the subject of prioritization of retained earnings, but specifically in the context of that housing account transfer and the security project. And we actually going in for a larger budget transfer for the security project than we were even talking about at the meeting. There was some discussion by Mr. Rafter about using concrete for runways and taxiways rather than asphalt. The FAA and Mass DOT have both reported negative experiences, mainly due to upkeep and maintenance, but we have also experienced the same thing with asphalt. Obviously on Nantucket, where there are multiple concrete suppliers, rather than just one asphalt supplier, having some competition would be nice. Although it was pointed out that for taxiway Echo, there's probably enough there for somebody to bring a portable plant over to make the asphalt rather than go through the other vendor. So anyway, Mrs. Topham, as she said, was agreed to go out to her relative and talk about concrete, and she reported on that discussion. So it's something we'll continue to look at, but apparently the FAA is not enthusiastic. That's all I have.
And I have one comment about you saying that they're gonna do enough work for whatever the last project was, that all the roads are being torn up. Maybe that we could get somebody to do the roads if there were, if that came to fruition, because I
In
just think-
concrete?
No, with the asphalt that you were talking about, whatever, just one, I'm sorry, it's gone. the runway or what were you saying? But there was gonna be a lot of asphalt and maybe that would encourage your company to come down.
Right.
And so I thought that I'm looking coming out this road or any roads with all the digging up that they're
Well,
doing.
I think either Mr. Rafter or Mr. Carberg has communicated this to, because it's a 2-year project, so there'd be an asphalt
Yeah.
plant here.
That's why I say it'd be more worthwhile.
with some
for them to
downtime,
come.
yeah,
A little
exactly.
competition, as you say, is always good.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything else? Yes.
Just on that one point, and not to belabor it, I think that perhaps one section of DOT and FAA may have some concerns, but at the same time, they just did a major runway at JFK out of concrete. So I don't want this to die. I know it's too late for Taxiway Echo, but there has been a lot of advances in the mix of concrete, the way it's made and the computer controlled. And so I think there may be some past feelings. It's hard to get people to change. I think that some of the off-island engineers and Mass DOT, they think off-island, traditionally your asphalt is cheaper, whereas here on Nantucket, that your concrete could be more competitive. So it's not just the fact that you actually would have multiple suppliers to compete for it. The fact is the two products are likely to be, more close in cost. And my hope is that for some future projects, we could look at it before it's too late, before we get to a design point where we say, well, we've already designed it all only on the assumption of asphalt. And maybe we need I think you're going to see on Nantucket some more roads and more driveways that are going to be made of concrete than asphalt in the next few years. So anyway, I just don't want it to just die because certain MassDOT people, in northern New England, and it didn't work for. And I do think our climate is closer to JFK than it is to Boston.
Thank you. Anything else from anybody? Is there any public comment at this time? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to private session, to public session, to review the minutes as enumerated for possible release, and the minutes of February 11th, 2020 for review and possible release. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding the Gatto claim, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. Under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, where the chair has determined that open session may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the Airport Commission. Is there
I'll
such a?
make that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Topham. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Planzer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have to do a roll call?
Yes, I guess we do. Thank you. Mr. Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Topham, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? And the chair votes aye. I think it'll be a quick one. But you have some things for us to sign, right?
Kevin is the resident engineer on the